In the annals of ancient Roman history, Diocletian's name is forever etched as that of a great reformer, a man who dared to shoulder the burden of saving the state. His epical reign marked the restoration of effective governance to a colossal empire that had plunged into chaos and near anarchy throughout the 3rd century. This was a period of unprecedented upheaval, when the very foundations of Roman power seemed on the verge of collapse. His path to the heights of power began not in opulent palaces but on dusty battlefields. Diocletian methodically and confidently ascended the harsh rungs of the Roman military hierarchy, displaying extraordinary talents as a strategist and leader. Over time, he achieved a prominent position, becoming commander of the army in the strategically vital province of Moesia, where his abilities were honed in constant clashes on the empire's borders. In the fateful year 284, after a tense confrontation that marked the end of an era of instability, Diocletian secured a decisive victory over his rival, Emperor Carinus. With this triumphant battle, he ascended to the imperial throne, taking the reins of the vast Roman Empire, which yearned for a strong hand and a clear vision for the future. However, his ascension to the throne was merely the beginning of his grand mission. Throughout his reign, Diocletian faced a kaleidoscope of monumental challenges, any one of which could have broken a less resolute ruler. The empire was torn by acute financial crises that depleted the state treasury and by incessant military threats. Barbarian tribes relentlessly attacked along the extended borders of the Danube and Rhine, while tension mounted on the empire's eastern frontiers, demanding a constant military presence and diplomatic dexterity. But Diocletian was not one to recoil in the face of adversity. To counter these threats and restore the state's former might, he took a bold and unprecedented step, implementing a series of radical reforms that forever changed the empire's face. Central among these was the establishment of the tetrarchy, or rule of 4, a seemingly ingenious system designed to ensure stability and operational governance across Rome's vast expanse. According to this innovative model, the empire was divided into 2 main parts, Eastern and Western, each ruled by one of 2 senior emperors, holding the title of Augustus. Assisting them were 2 junior emperors, known as Caesars, intended not only to support the Augusti but also to become their successors, ensuring a smooth and predictable transfer of power. Beyond the tetrarchy, his transformations encompassed virtually all aspects of state life. Diocletian undertook a massive reorganization of the empire's administrative apparatus, aiming to enhance its efficiency and accountability. To replenish the depleted treasury, new, at times burdensome but vitally important, tax systems were introduced. However, not all of his decisions were aimed at strengthening the state economically or militarily. His reign also saw tragic events related to the persecution of Christians, leaving a dark mark on the history of his rule. Then, in 305, when his power seemed unshakable, Diocletian performed an act that astonished his contemporaries and remains unprecedented in Roman imperial history. He voluntarily abdicated the throne. This was not an escape from difficulties but a conscious decision to retire, leaving the reins of power in the hands of his successors. Such a step was unheard of for Roman emperors, accustomed to ruling until death, and only underscored his unique vision for the empire's future that he sought to embody. Before he became the powerful emperor whose decisions shaped the destinies of millions, Diocletian's early life remained, and still remains, shrouded in mystery. Only one undeniable detail is known, his birth on December 22. As for the first 40 years of his life, they are surprisingly obscure, their contours emerging only through scarce and often disputed accounts. This leaves ample room for conjecture and research attempting to unravel the enigma of his development. Modern scholars, meticulously examining available data, lean towards his birth occurring in the mid-240s, specifically just before Rome's momentous yet highly turbulent 1000th anniversary, celebrated in 248. This period itself was full of omens and upheavals, possibly shaping the future ruler's character. He is known to have hailed from the rugged yet picturesque province of Dalmatia, and most likely, his hometown was Salona, a place he chose decades later as his quiet refuge after abdicating power, completing the circle of his incredible destiny. Initially bearing the name Gaius Valerius Diocles, he became the subject of conflicting traditions regarding his origins even before his elevation. These legends, passed down orally, sometimes paint diametrically opposed pictures of his early years. Some sources claim he was the freedman of a certain Senator Annalinus, which in itself would imply overcoming significant social barriers. Others, more convincingly, suggest his father was a humble scribe or clerk, an origin that, though not aristocratic, still opened a path to education and service, making his subsequent rise even more astonishing. Indeed, the history of the Roman Empire already knew examples of remarkable social mobility. The ascension of Pertinax, the son of a former slave, to the imperial throne in 193, long before Diocletian, clearly demonstrated that even from the most humble strata of society could emerge a man destined to rule the world. This possibility, this precedent, undoubtedly inspired those who, like Diocletian, possessed the ambition and talent necessary for such a remarkable ascent. Diocletian's career, entirely forged by the turbulent events of the mid-3rd century, was predominantly military. Serving under distinguished generals like Claudius II, Aurelian, and Probus, between approximately 268 and 282 CE, he presumably held a number of key posts, including prefect of the first cohort of Gauls, military tribune of the 7th Legion Gemena stationed in Spain, and prefect of the cohort of Dardanians. It is likely his service record included many other army positions, though precise details are scarce. According to one ancient legend, Diocletian may even have been in Gaul, where a mysterious Druid prophetess foretold his future imperial destiny. In his personal life, Diocletian was married to Prisca, about whom very little is known, except that she bore him his only child, a daughter named Valeria. By 282, he had reached a high rank in the military hierarchy, becoming commander of the Protectors, a unit of staff officers who served as Emperor Carus's personal guard, whom he accompanied on his Mesopotamian campaign. Emperor Carus, whose fate at first seemed favorable, ascended to the imperial throne with 2 sons, with whom he planned to share the reins of power. Initial success accompanied him in Mesopotamia, where his endeavors culminated in victories. However, his fate soon took a tragic turn, and Carus, along with his family, died under very mysterious circumstances in 282. According to ancient accounts, Carus's life ended from a sudden and powerful lightning strike. Nemirian, Carus's son, was elevated to the imperial throne and slowly advanced with his army, returning from an exhausting eastern campaign against the Persians. He traveled in a closed litter with tightly drawn curtains, aiming to protect his ailing eyes, possibly afflicted by infection or severe fatigue, and as a result, he rarely appeared in public. As the army approached the strategically important Nicomedia in November 284, an unbearable stench began to emanate from the litter, unequivocally indicating the emperor's lifeless body. At that fateful moment, on November 20, Diocletian, one of the prominent generals, was immediately proclaimed the new ruler of the Roman Empire. His first and most decisive act was a solemn declaration of his own non-involvement in Nemirian's death, while placing all responsibility on the late emperor's father-in-law, the influential Praetorian prefect Aper, whom he promptly pierced with his sharp blade. In the minds of contemporaries, a sharp question immediately arose: were these actions of Diocletian those of a guilt-ridden man frantically trying to shift the burden of responsibility, or merely an attempt to dispel unfounded and dangerous suspicions? Suspicions against Aper as the direct murderer seemed, at the very least, doubtful, leaving a veil of mystery and uncertainty regarding the true circumstances of Nemirian's enigmatic demise. However, despite all questions and doubts, Diocletian's swift and resolute will proved far stronger and more effective than any hesitation or possible confusion on Aper's part, determining the outcome of this dramatic situation. The newly crowned emperor adopted a more majestic name, Gaius Valerius Diocletian, thereby affirming his connection to Latin heritage. However, another legitimate ruler, Carinus, still held power in the western territories. His predecessor, Carus, had left Carinus in charge of defending the Rhine frontier before embarking on his Persian campaign. Carinus, depicted in historical sources as a typical tyrant, faced numerous and severe challenges throughout his reign, including a massive fire that engulfed the Roman Forum and the constant emergence of various contenders disputing his authority. As Diocletian advanced confidently through the Balkan Peninsula, Carinus moved to meet him. Their armies clashed in a decisive battle near the Margus River, not far from Viminatium. Although Carinus initially seemed to gain the upper hand in this bloody confrontation, he unexpectedly fell victim to a disgruntled officer who took his life. This event instantly cleared the path for Diocletian, leaving him the undisputed and sole ruler of the entire empire. Upon coming to power, Diocletian immediately adopted a policy aimed at universal reconciliation. He strategically integrated Carinus's comitatus, his former retinue and administrative apparatus, into his own emerging system of governance. Crucially, he retained Carinus's praetorian prefect, Aristobulus, in his post. As a notable gesture, Diocletian retrospectively declared that he would share the consulship of 285 with Aristobulus, effectively occupying the place that had been intended for the late Carinus. Aristobulus, in turn, continued to enjoy Diocletian's favor, subsequently holding high offices such as proconsul of Africa and urban prefect. Moreover, to solidify an atmosphere of unity and stability, Diocletian proclaimed a general amnesty, which significantly contributed to pacifying and strengthening the new order. Diocletian's advance into northern Italy, contrary to expectations, did not lead to a formal capture of Rome itself. This decision was dictated by strategic foresight, as a direct assault on the ancient capital could have become an unnecessary diversion of resources and attention from the empire's more pressing tasks. Instead, in the summer of 285, the emperor took a truly fateful step. He appointed Maximian, his longtime comrade and compatriot from the Danube region, to the position of Caesar, thereby laying the foundations of what modern historians call the diarchy. This choice, despite subsequent generations often depicting Maximian merely as a crude tyrant, proved surprisingly insightful and promising. Their unwavering personal loyalty to each other served as the cornerstone for forming a strong imperial brotherhood, which ensured the Roman Empire a period of relative stability lasting almost 2 decades. To further strengthen their relationship and symbolize this unbreakable bond, Diocletian and Maximian adopted each other's nomen. Thus, Diocletian became known as Gaius Aurelius Valerius Diocletian Iovius, and Maximian, adding his co-ruler's name, adopted the title Gaius Aurelius Valerius Maximian Herculeus. The titles they adopted, Iovius and Herculeus, associated respectively with the supreme god Jupiter and his mighty son Hercules, clearly illustrated their distribution of roles in governing the vast empire. Diocletian, like the king of the gods, was responsible for formulating global policy and issuing commands, while Maximian, like the tireless Hercules, diligently and effectively executed these directives. Soon after his appointment, Maximian was dispatched to Gaul to suppress a large-scale Bagaudae revolt, and after successfully completing this mission on April 1, 286, he was elevated to the rank of Augustus. Meanwhile, Carausius, once a prominent lieutenant of Maximian, boldly proclaimed himself emperor, establishing control over vast territories in Britain and northern Gaul. Maximian's attempts to quell this rebellion, unfortunately, were unsuccessful, as his attention was fully engrossed in fighting Germanic tribes and repelling their invasions across the Rhine frontier. Diocletian, in turn, was active on other fronts. In 285, he campaigned against the Sarmatians in the Danube region, and then undertook a prolonged journey through Syria and Palestine, where he dealt with complex diplomatic matters, negotiating with senior rabbis and Persian representatives. In 288, his military activities continued. He conducted a successful campaign against the Saracens in the harsh conditions of the Syrian desert. By 289, he was again on the Danube, and it was then that Diocletian began his advance into Germania, moving through the province of Rhaetia, while Maximian launched his own campaign from Mogontiacum. As they advanced together, both generals systematically employed scorched earth tactics, destroying crops and food supplies, thereby depriving the Germans of their means of subsistence. This conquest not only expanded the empire's borders but also provided Maximian with the opportunity to continue preparations for a decisive confrontation with Carausius unhindered. In December 290, Diocletian and Maximian met in Mediolanum, a significant gathering attended by a large number of high-ranking officials, including senators who had specifically traveled from Rome. After this important meeting concluded, Maximian departed back to Augusta Treverorum, while Diocletian headed for Sirmium. Throughout their joint reign, the close and effective connection between Diocletian and Maximian served as a strong foundation for stable state governance, which allowed Diocletian to implement a series of vital reforms that subsequently shaped the appearance and structure of the late Roman state. Diocletian, possessing keen political acumen, quickly realized that relying solely on one co-ruler was an insufficient strategy. This deficiency was particularly acutely felt amidst serious challenges emanating from Carausius in Britain and along the English Channel coast in Gaul, regions where piratical activity had significantly intensified in recent decades, posing a constant threat to maritime communications and coastal territories. To ensure stability and more effective counteraction against potential dangers, it was necessary to substantially expand the Imperial College. Since Diocletian himself had no direct male heir, and Maximian's son, Maxentius, had not yet reached an age to assume such a responsible position, the decision was made to use marital alliances as a tool for selecting the most suitable candidates for the ruling college, while preserving the principles of dynastic succession. Emperor Diocletian chose Constantius and Galerius, both of Illyrian origin, whose outstanding military prowess was undeniably proven. To strengthen these alliances, Constantius married Maximian's daughter, Theodora, and Galerius, in turn, married Diocletian's own daughter, Valeria. Thus, on March 1, 293, both these generals were solemnly elevated to the rank of Caesars, taking positions as junior partners and direct assistants to their Augusti within the clearly structured hierarchical system of the Imperial College. This system, known as the Tetrarchy, or Rule of Four, was established with the firm hope of ensuring a predetermined and seamless plan of succession for the future of the Roman Empire. The approach chosen by Diocletian was widely regarded by contemporaries and historians as meritocratic and highly pragmatic. It was based on the principle of utilizing existing family ties, provided by circumstances, rather than purposefully seeking and implementing anti-dynastic alternatives, which underscored his pursuit of stability. In this context, the fundamental difference between appointing new sons-in-law to the positions of Caesars and choosing already existing sons-in-law for this important role significantly influenced public perception of his political decisions and the legitimacy of the new order. Historically, Roman emperors, when possible, traditionally favored their sons as direct heirs, with only a few very notable exceptions. Only the complete absence of their own sons forced them to resort to adopting outsiders to ensure the continuity of power. Thus, Diocletian's choice can be interpreted not as a rigid anti-dynastic strategy, but rather as a flexible and practical approach to the question of succession, which optimally utilized the family ties available to him to strengthen the empire's governance system. The expanded Imperial College, known as the Tetrarchy, convincingly demonstrated its effectiveness and strategic value. One striking example was the successful resolution of the crisis in Gaul, where Constantius, then serving as Caesar, masterfully confronted the usurper Carausius. Carausius's inability to maintain power led to his demise at the hands of Electus, who, in turn, was also swiftly overthrown by Constantius. This occurred during a decisive naval invasion of Britain in 296. Thanks to Constantius's swift and resolute actions, the ancient city of London was saved from imminent plunder by Frankish detachments. In recognition of this significant victory, a medallion was later minted with the concise but profound inscription, "Restorer of the Eternal Light." At the same time, on the other end of the empire, Maximian, also a member of the Imperial College, undertook an important imperial visit to Spain, also in 296. There he successfully suppressed a dangerous tribal confederation known as the Quinquagentiani, which posed a serious threat to regional stability. After completing this mission, Maximian triumphantly returned to Rome in 299. Meanwhile, Diocletian, the senior co-ruler, focused his attention on defending the Danubian frontier, strategically positioned in Sirmium. From there, he dispatched Galerius, another Caesar, to the east with a dual task, to quell an uprising that had erupted in Thebaid and simultaneously to confront the ambitious Narse, the new king of Persia, whose plans posed a potential threat to Rome's eastern provinces. Galerius's campaign in the east culminated in a legendary victory, which not only secured Rome's control over a significant part of northern Mesopotamia but also laid the foundation for establishing peace with Persia for an unprecedentedly long period, the subsequent 40 years. While Galerius continued his advance into Armenia, alarming news reached Diocletian. A usurper named Domitius had appeared in Egypt, managing to seize vast territories of this fertile province. Displaying strategic prudence, Diocletian did not immediately rush into battle. He waited, anticipating convincing signs of success from Galerius on the Persian front, before embarking on the risky endeavor of bringing the rebellious Egyptian regions back under imperial control. This well-thought-out tactic allowed him to begin and successfully conclude his campaign in Egypt even before Galerius reached Ctesiphon. The usurper Domitius died in December 297, and by this point, Diocletian had already firmly established control over all of the Egyptian countryside. However, Alexandria, a powerful fortress whose defense was skillfully organized under the leadership of Diocletian's former corrector, Aelius Achilleus, continued to resist. The city likely held out until March 298. In commemoration of this final victory, a magnificent triumphal column in honor of Diocletian, known to this day as Pompey's Pillar, was erected in Alexandria later that same year. Diocletian's triumphs and the subsequent regularization of affairs in Egypt reached their climax with the issuance of the famous Edict on Prices in 301, proclaimed from Antioch. The military successes achieved in Germania, Sarmatia, Persia, Britain, as well as in the Carpathians, Armenia, Media, and Adiabene, vividly demonstrated the undeniable strength and impressive power of the empire, contributing to the formation of a profound sense of peace and unshakable confidence among the populace. Thanks to vigilant control over the Rhine and Danube frontiers, as well as the strategic expansion of the Imperial College and a series of successful military campaigns skillfully conducted by the tetrarchs, the empire entered a period of relative stability and tranquility. Such stability was unprecedented for the Roman state over the preceding 5 decades. The first half of the 3rd century marked an extraordinarily difficult period, permeated by war, devastating plague epidemics, rapid inflation, widespread economic collapse, and the pervasive decline of cities. Among contemporaries and historians, there was uncertainty as to whether these numerous problems represented a single, overarching crisis encompassing the entire imperial territory. The structures of the Augustan Principate, which still retained their functionality during the Severan period, gradually crumbled under the relentless pressure of continuous external invasions and internal usurpations of power. Formidable external adversaries, such as tribal confederations settled along the Rhine and Danube, as well as ambitious Persian kings in the east, posed significant and constant threats to imperial security. The imperial throne itself became extremely vulnerable to overthrow, as the army often put forward usurpers who sought military efficiency and promised generous rewards. The empire reached its nadir after the humiliating capture of Emperor Valerian by the Persian king Shapurai, which led to its de facto division into 3 parts, with Gallienus managing to retain control only over the central core of the state. The revival of the Roman Empire began with the emergence of the Illyrian soldier emperors, originating from less affluent provinces, among whom Diocletian particularly stood out. These general rulers managed to reunite the empire in 268, but to achieve this goal, they had to relinquish some vulnerable territories, such as Dacia. Diocletian, who assumed the imperial office under such challenging conditions, spearheaded sweeping reforms that, throughout his long 20-year reign, shaped the late Roman state. His approach to governance was characterized by a unique blend of cautious foresight and audacious decisiveness, while he invariably sought counsel from both divine sources and his closest advisors. Not considering himself a radical reformer, Diocletian saw his primary mission as the guardian and restorer of the empire's former strength and stability. The profound insecurity that gripped imperial power during the crisis of the 3rd century provoked significant changes in the institution of governance itself. Diocletian's chief and most far-sighted innovation was the introduction of realistic collegiate rule, known as the First Tetrarchy, consisting of 2 Augusti and 2 Caesars. This innovative arrangement was designed to resolve the numerous crises plaguing the empire, as well as to preemptively address the perennial question of succession. Within this college of 4 rulers, Diocletian maintained his seniority, and while each tetrarch held significant power in their respective spheres, Diocletian could intervene in the affairs of any part of the empire. His decrees, including the harsh persecution of Christians, were often enforced by his colleagues. However, ensuring full compliance with these edicts proved extremely difficult, sometimes leading to accidental circumvention or partial disregard. Despite these challenges, Diocletian's undeniable prestige sustained harmony and cooperation within the college throughout his years of reform. Diocletian's reign witnessed profound changes in imperial manners, moving away from the ostentatious civility characteristic of the Augustan era towards a more majestic and ritualized mode of operation. Imperial attire, the tradition of subjects prostrating themselves before the ruler, and the adoption of the title Dominus Noster, our Lord, distinctly emphasized his exceptional status as an undisputed sovereign. While the origins of these innovations are difficult to attribute solely to Diocletian, his prolonged rule nevertheless contributed to the entrenchment of existing trends, transforming them into an integral part of imperial protocol. Despite the ceremonial innovations, the rulers of the Tetrarchy maintained their visibility and relative accessibility to their subjects, continuously moving across the empire's vast territories. Diocletian, in particular, readily accepted petitions from his subjects and, notably, issued thousands of rescripts addressed even to those in the most humble positions of the social hierarchy. Solemn entries into cities, known as the Adventa ceremony, were regularly held, gathering large crowds eager for even a glimpse